I'm going to have to tread lightly on this one. The story revolves a lot around my ex-girlfriend, and we didn't end on good terms. It's been over a decade now, and I'm pretty sure it's all water under the bridge for the both of us. But I have no way of contacting her to ask her for permission to tell her story, so I'll have to keep it vague so I don't blow up her spot. After high school, I thought I was free of my haunted home. I planned to join the Marines and be gone for at least 4 years. Well, without getting into too much detail, I got hurt in boot camp, and this led to the corpsmen finding out about another medical problem I had lied about to join up. Don't think me scummy. This is pretty common practice among recruiters. I was told to tell the MEPs I was as fit as Captain America so I could ship out. I was desperate to leave and serve my country during the height of both wars on terror. But stress fractures in my shins led to more problems, and that led me coming back home. You can see how the anger and depression started again. I felt trapped, like the parsonage was a black hole sucking me back in. There I was, starting from square one again. Like most 18 to 19-year-olds, I was trying to figure out my life. That's when I met Ashley, and we started dating. We knew each other back in the day and reconnected later in life. The biggest obstacle we had was she lived 2 hours away. My parents tried to work with us. She could come stay the weekend, but I had to respect my parents' rules and sleep in a separate room from hers. I didn't mind. It was their house, their rules. Other times, I went to stay at her apartment, and that's when the weirdness started. First off, I noticed she slept with multiple layers of blankets, still had a nightlight and a collection of stand-up comedy CDs and stereo right next to her bed. Every time I slept there, she put me on the side closest to the closet. I would have sleep paralysis every night, but these were a little different. I was sharing the point of view of something in the closet, looking at me sleeping. I could see myself asleep, and I could feel the anger directed towards me from the entity. I would float closer to my sleeping face and begin cursing in an unknown hateful language. I felt the jealousy of the entity. I felt the anger toward myself because I was in its way. When I woke up, I would usually spring out of bed. That habit hadn't worn off from boot camp yet. This would scare Ashley because she knew what was happening. She finally told me what was happening to her and her roommate's sister. She said they had seen a shadow stalking them ever since they were children. She had the multiple blankets because she could feel it caressing her at night. The comedy CDs because she could hear her name being whispered and the nightlight was obvious. I know what you're thinking. This is the plot to the Paranormal Activity movies. This all happened in 2006 to 2007. The movie came out in 2009. Anyways, she told me she only slept good when I was there because I was taking all the heat from whatever it was instead of her. I kind of felt like a white knight, saving Milady from demons, so I just rolled with it. But the longer we were together, the worse it got back home. I remember distinctly one night when I drove home from her apartment in the middle of the night. I had to work the next day, so I had to leave around 3 a.m. I was on a dark stretch of highway between cities and trying to stay awake. I started to feel something pushing against the back of my seat. It reminded me of when my friends would mess with me by kicking or kneeing my seat while driving. I tried to ignore it as me being tired, but it got to the point where it was impossible to ignore. It felt like somebody's knees were pressing so hard I was almost touching the steering wheel. I never looked back. That's what it wanted. I knew it was waiting for me to turn around so it could do something to me. How easy would it have been to crash and just be chalked up as me falling asleep at the wheel? So I rolled down the windows and blared Christian music the whole way back. Things came to a head at my house when my parents said Ashley could come over for the weekend. It was a Thursday, and I okayed it with her on the phone. That night, the shadows came back. I would wake up in the middle of the night to see two of them standing behind the chair in my room. They would fade away the longer I stared at them, but they were making their presence known. She came over Friday, and I let her have my bed while I slept in the living room. Around 3 a.m., she came sneaking in to see me. I thought she was up for some rule breaking at first, but then I noticed she had been crying and was shaking. I've seen something in your room, she told me. Are they standing behind the chair? I asked. Her eyes widened in surprise. How did you know? I agreed to sleep in the same room as her, but I slept on the floor in case my parents caught me. I was on the ground speaking up to her on the bed, and somewhere I said, "Oh shit." "Oh shit," was repeated back to me in my own voice from under the bed right next to me. I kind of freaked out and sat up, but I could see she was starting to cry again, so I played it off. The same sleep paralysis that night, except I looked down at myself sleeping by the bed. From the creature's point of view, I could see two black boots on my head. Hate and twisted insults spilled out in a guttural voice. We were both immature and broke and far away from each other, so the relationship ended badly. I still regret the hateful things I told her when we were fighting, but one last thing happened before things ended. I was at her apartment again. She was begging me to stay, but I couldn't because of work. She told me she was scared to be alone. As I was comforting her, I saw a glowing orb, like a bubble with yellow in the middle, appearing behind her and shoot off to the ceiling. I had just told her that God would protect her when this thing appeared. It was in a fully lit room, and it was the most blatant thing I had seen since the shadow person in my living room years ago. It was the entity saying, "No, he won't." I'm not in contact with her anymore, but sometimes I think of her and worry. I'm not missing our relationship. It was pretty toxic, but I worry about her hauntings. Life is hard enough without the extra layer of demonic oppression or whatever it was. Well, say a prayer for her. Maybe one for me. The spooky shit has dropped off for over a decade now. I hope talking about it doesn't stir it back up.